My daughter-in-law called at 2 a.m. sobbing, but then I heard her true voice whisper, "Your son is dead. He left everything to me, you get nothing." She thought the blizzard would keep me away. She was wrong. I drove straight into the storm to find the truth. 7 days later at the funeral, I brought a surprise guest. When I told her to look behind you, she didn't just panic, she fell to her knees and begged for mercy. "Thank you so much for stopping by. It means the world to me. I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from right now? Let me know in the comments." Please also note, this narrative blends real emotions with fictional elements for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons is coincidental, but the warning behind the story is very real. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m., a shrill, piercing sound that sliced through the silence of my bedroom like a serrated knife. No one calls at that hour with good news. My hand shot out from under the quilt instinct taking over before my eyes were even fully open. Years of working search and rescue in the Rockies had wired me this way, always ready for the emergency, always bracing for the worst. I grabbed the phone. The screen was blinding in the dark room, displaying a name that made my stomach tighten. Kendall. "Hello." My voice was rough with sleep. "Meredith." The voice on the other end was breathless, punctuated by jagged, heaving sobs. "Mom, oh God, I'm so sorry. It's Garrett. He's gone." The world stopped. The wind howling outside my window seemed to vanish, leaving only a cold, ringing silence in my ears. I sat up, gripping the sheets. "What do you mean, gone, Kendall? Speak clearly." "An accident." She choked out the words, wet with tears. "He went night skiing by himself. There was an avalanche near the ridge. The patrol just found him." "Oh God, Meredith, there's nothing left." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. But my brain, that cold, analytical part of me trained to analyze disaster scenes, hit the brakes. Night skiing. Impossible. My son Garrett Mercer was a man who calculated risk for a living. He checked weather reports 3 times before driving to the grocery store. He hadn't skied at night since he broke his leg in college, and in a storm like this, he wouldn't set foot outside the chalet. "I'm coming," I said, swinging my legs out of bed. The floorboards were freezing beneath my feet. "I'm leaving now." "No." Kendall's scream was sharp, almost frantic. "No, Mom, you can't. The blizzard is a whiteout. The pass is closed. You'll never make it." She took a breath, her voice dropping to a desperate whimper. "Plus, you shouldn't see him like this. Please, just let me handle the arrangements. I'll bring his ashes to you." Ashes already. I was about to argue when I heard it. It was faint, a low rumble in the background on Kendall's end, as if someone had placed a hand over the receiver but failed to cover it completely. "Tell the old hag not to come. It's done." My blood turned to ice. I knew that voice. It was gravelly, deep, and unmistakably familiar. It belonged to Harlan the Aspen sheriff, a man who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my table for 20 years. A man who should have been comforting a grieving widow, not whispering insults in the dark. "Who is there with you, Kendall?" I demanded, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. Just the paramedics." She stammered, her rhythm thrown off. "Please, Meredith, stay home." The line went dead. I sat in the dark for exactly 5 seconds, staring at the black mirror of my phone. The grief was there, a tidal wave waiting to crash down, but I built a dam against it. Not yet. I couldn't afford to grieve a death that didn't make sense. Garrett wouldn't ski at night. Harlan wouldn't call me a hag. And Kendall wouldn't be trying this hard to keep me away unless she had something to hide. I didn't pack a funeral dress. Instead, I grabbed my old tactical duffel bag. I threw in my heavy-duty flashlight, a first aid trauma kit, and my long-range radio. Then I unlocked the bottom drawer of my nightstand and took out the .38 revolver my husband had left me. I checked the chamber. Loaded. Outside, the storm was raging, promising zero visibility and treacherous ice. Kendall thought the blizzard would stop me. She thought I was just a fragile old grandmother. I pulled on my boots and kicked open the front door, the wind instantly whipping snow into my face. I climbed into my battered Ford pickup and turned the key. The engine roared to life, hungry for the road. "I'm coming, son," I whispered to the windshield. I slammed the truck into gear and drove straight into the heart of the storm. The drive to Aspen, typically a scenic 4-hour cruise, turned into a 7-hour battle for survival. By the time the wrought iron gates of the Mercer estate materialized out of the whiteout, my hands were cramping around the steering wheel. I punched in the gate code Garrett's birthday, and the heavy metal groaned open, reluctant in the freezing wind. The villa sat atop the ridge like a fortress of gray stone valued at $5 million, but currently radiating the warmth of a crypt. No Christmas wreath hung on the door. No lights welcomed me. I pounded on the heavy oak door. Minutes ticked by before the lock finally clicked. The door swung open to reveal Kendall, my daughter-in-law. She was dressed in immaculate black silk that hugged her frame, her face pale but composed. Even her waterproof mascara hadn't run a stark contrast to the hysterical sobbing I'd heard on the phone hours ago. "Meredith," she said, her voice flat. She stood squarely in the center of the doorway, a gatekeeper in high heels. "I told you not to come. The roads are suicide." "I'm still alive, Kendall," I said, brushing past her before she could block me. I stepped into the foyer. The heat hit me first, followed by the overwhelming, cloying scent of white lilies, funeral flowers. The house was staged. She had prepared the set before the actor had even left the stage. "Where is he?" I demanded, turning to face her. "Where is my son?" Kendall closed the door, sealing out the storm. "He's not here. The coroner took him. Because of the blizzard, they had to move quickly. It's better this way. You want to remember him alive, don't you?" Her performance was flawless, rehearsed. Grief is messy. It's red eyes, runny noses, and mismatched clothes. This was cold calculation. "I want to see Toby," I said, cutting through her script. "Where is my grandson?" Kendall stiffened. "Toby is sleeping. He's in shock, Meredith. The doctor gave him a sedative. He saw the rescue team bring the body bag down. It was traumatic. He can't see anyone right now." "I am not anyone. I am his grandmother." I took a step toward the grand staircase. Kendall moved with surprising speed, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my coat. "No, do not wake him up. If you're going to be hysterical, you can stay at a hotel in town. I won't have you traumatizing my son further." We stood there for a moment, a silent battle of wills in the opulent hallway. I looked at her. Really, looked at her. Beneath the designer mourning clothes, she wasn't vibrating with grief. She was trembling with tension. She wasn't mourning. She was guarding. "Fine," I lied, pulling my arm free. "I'll get my bags from the truck, but I am staying here tonight. This is my son's house." I turned and walked back out into the biting cold, needing to breathe air that didn't smell of lies. I tramped through the snow toward my truck, but a flicker of movement caught my peripheral vision. I looked up at the second floor to the dark window of the nursery. Pressed against the glass was a small, pale face. It was Toby, my 7-year-old grandson. He wasn't sleeping. He was wide awake. His small hands were splayed against the pane, and even through the swirling snow, I saw it pure, unadulterated terror. He opened his mouth as if to scream, but the storm swallowed the sound. Suddenly, a pair of large gloved hands appeared from the darkness behind him. They grabbed the boy's shoulders and yanked him back violently. The heavy curtains were whipped shut, plunging the window back into darkness. My hand dropped to my pocket fingers, brushing the cold steel of my revolver. Kendall had lied. Toby wasn't sedated. He was a prisoner. Once I hauled my duffel bag into the hallway, Kendall gestured vaguely toward the guest wing. "Go get settled," she said, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "I have calls to make. The funeral director is coming at dawn." She turned her heel and clicked away toward the library, assuming I was a defeated old woman who would do as she was told. She was wrong. I waited until her footsteps faded, then I turned left, not right. I headed straight for the mudroom at the back of the house, the staging area for all of Garrett's mountain expeditions. The room smelled of cedar cold wax and damp wool. It was lined with racks of expensive gear skis, snowboards, helmets. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, sweeping over the rows of organized equipment. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached Garrett's personal locker. If he had died on the mountain, this locker should be empty of his essentials. I pulled the door open. There, sitting on the bottom shelf, were his boots. Not just any boots, but his battered, custom-fitted Scarpa climbing boots. He called them his ironclads. Garrett was superstitious to a fault. He never set foot on a mountain, whether to ski, hike, or climb, without wearing these boots for the approach. He claimed they were the only things that kept his ankles from shattering. I reached out and touched the leather. It was bone dry. There was a layer of dust on the laces. If Garrett had gone night skiing, as Kendall claimed, he would have worn these to drive to the slopes. He would have worn them to walk from the parking lot to the lodge. The fact that they were sitting here dry and gathering dust screamed the truth louder than any confession. Garrett never left this house. He didn't go to the mountain. The mountain was brought to him. My breathing grew shallow. This wasn't an accident. This was a staging. I scanned the rest of the room, looking for anything else out of place. Near the boot bench sat a small wire mesh wastebasket. It was empty save for a single crumpled ball of yellow legal paper. My instincts, honed by years of tracking missing persons, flared. I reached down and plucked the paper from the bin, smoothing it out on top of the washing machine. The handwriting was jagged, rushed Garrett's scrawl when he was angry or stressed. It wasn't a letter. It was a list of reminders written in heavy, angry strokes that nearly tore through the paper. 1. Cancel joint accounts. 2. Call lawyer, Monday, 9 a.m. 3. Change beneficiary. Cut K out. The breath hissed out of my lungs. The date scribbled in the corner was yesterday. Monday. Garrett had planned to change his life insurance policy and his will the very next morning. He was going to cut Kendall out of everything. But he never made it to Tuesday. You didn't die in an accident, my boy. I whispered, folding the note and shoving it deep into my bra, right next to my heart. You were murdered for $5 million. A floorboard creaked above me, then the heavy thud of footsteps descending the back stairs. Someone was coming. I slipped the crumpled note into my pocket and stepped out of the mudroom just as the heavy front door swung open. A gust of snow swirled into the foyer, followed by a towering figure shaking off a dusting of white powder. It was Harlan. 30 years ago, I had taught this man how to tie a fishing knot. 10 years ago, I had pinned the sheriff's badge on his chest when his own father was too drunk to attend the ceremony. He had been Garrett's best friend growing up, practically a second son to me. Meredith. He exhaled, his face crumpling into a mask of sympathy. He strode across the marble floor, arms open wide. God, I told Kendall not to let you drive in this. Look at you. You're freezing. For a split second, I wanted to collapse into that embrace. I wanted to believe that the voice on the phone, the one that called me an old hag, was a hallucination brought on by grief. I let him hug me. He smelled of pine gun oil and something else. Something sweet and cloying that didn't belong on a lawman in the middle of a blizzard. He pulled back, keeping his hands on my shoulders. I'm so sorry, Mur. I tried everything. The boys, we dug for hours, but the avalanche, it was massive. I want to see the body, Harlan, I said, keeping my voice steady, watching his eyes. Harlan flinched. Just a micro-expression, a twitch of the left eye, but I caught it. You don't want to do that. Trust me. The trauma, it's severe. Let's preserve his dignity. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a clipboard with a sheaf of papers. Kendall is a wreck upstairs. She can't handle the paperwork, so I'm helping out. We need to authorize the cremation. The coroner is worried about decomposition issues with the power grid failing in this storm. It's a mercy, Meredith. Sign it and we can bring him home to you in an urn by tonight. He held out a pen, the mercy pitch. It was smooth, practiced. I looked down at the paper. Authorization for immediate cremation. It was the final nail in the coffin of any investigation. Without a body, there is no autopsy. Without an autopsy, murder becomes an accident forever. I need my reading glasses. I lied, leaning in closer to him, pretending to squint at the fine print. That's when I saw it. Harlan was wearing his official beige uniform shirt. On the stiff collar, partially hidden by the lapel of his tactical jacket, but visible from my angle, was a smudge. It wasn't blood. It was a smear of dark wine-red lipstick. The exact shade of Merlot Midnight that Kendall was wearing when she opened the door an hour ago. The world tilted on its axis. The sweet smell on him wasn't air freshener. It was Kendall's perfume. The voice on the phone wasn't a hallucination. My second son wasn't here to comfort me. He was sleeping with my daughter-in-law, and together they were trying to burn the evidence of my son's murder before I could even say goodbye. I straightened up, my heart turning into a stone in my chest. I pushed the clipboard back toward him. "I'll sign it later," I said, forcing a trembling hand to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "I need some coffee first. The drive, it's caught up with me." Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly, the warmth evaporating. "Meredith time is of the essence," I said. "Later, Harlan." I turned my back on him and walked toward the kitchen, feeling his gaze boring into my spine like a laser sight. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was hunted, and I was completely alone in a house full of wolves. I left the kitchen, but I didn't return to the foyer where the wolves were waiting for my signature. Instead, I slipped off my boots to silence my footsteps and crept up the servants' staircase at the back of the house. Voices drifted up from below Harlan's low baritone, mixing with Kendall's hushed, urgent whispers. They were too busy plotting their victory to notice the grandmother slipping through the shadows. The nursery door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. The room was dim, lit only by a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. Toby, my 7-year-old grandson, was sitting in the center of the rug, surrounded by scattered crayons. He didn't look up when I entered. He was rocking back and forth, a rhythmic, soothing motion that broke my heart. "Toby," I whispered, kneeling beside him, "it's Grandma." He stopped rocking. Slowly, he turned his head. His eyes, usually bright and mischievous, were hollow, rimmed with dark circles. He looked at me, then looked at the door, terror seizing his small frame. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The trauma had stolen his voice. "It's okay," I soothed, pulling him into a hug. He felt frail like a bird with hollow bones. "You don't have to speak. Just show me. Show Grandma what happened." I pointed to the paper in front of him. Toby picked up a black crayon. His hand trembled violently, but he began to draw. It wasn't a child's idle doodle. It was a frantic testimony. First he drew a jagged line, a cliff, then a stick figure falling surrounded by red scribbles. Next to the cliff stood a female figure with long black hair and exaggerated red lips. She wasn't crying. The mouth was curved into a giant U-shaped smile. But it was the third figure that made my blood run cold. Standing next to the smiling woman was a hulking shape, colored entirely in heavy blue strokes. A blue monster. On the monster's chest, Toby had drawn a jagged silver star, the sheriff's badge. Toby tapped the blue monster, then tapped the falling man, tears finally spilling onto the paper. He was telling me that the law hadn't helped his father. The law had helped kill him. Suddenly, the door flew open. Kendall stood there, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. The grieving widow act was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, striding into the room. She snatched the paper from Toby's hands before I could stop her. She glanced at the drawing, her eyes narrowing, and then she ripped it in half, then in quarters. "He has an overactive imagination, Meredith," she said, coldly crumpling the evidence into her fist. "The doctor said he's hallucinating. Don't you dare feed his delusions." She grabbed my arm, her grip bruising. "Get out, go to your room. If you step foot near my son again, I will have Harlan arrest you for trespassing. Do not test me." She shoved me into the hallway and slammed the door. The lock clicked from the inside. I stood there shaking, listening to Toby's muffled sobs from behind the wood. They had the law. They had the house. They had the boy. I retreated to the guest room, but I didn't unpack. I paced the floor, the image of the blue monster burned into my retina. I couldn't save Toby here, not when they held all the cards. To save the boy, I needed leverage. I needed undeniable proof, and there was only one place to find it. I looked out the window. The blizzard was raging, a wall of white death. "Wait for me, Toby," I whispered. I grabbed my tactical bag and the revolver. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to the one place Kendall and Harlan thought no one would dare go tonight. I was going to the mountain. The garage was a cavern of shadows, colder than the house, but warmer than the hell awaiting me outside. I didn't need a light to find what I was looking for. Garrett kept the spare key to his Polaris snowmobile inside a magnetic box under the chassis. It was a trick I had taught him when he was 16, so he'd never be stranded. My fingers brushed the cold metal box. Click, got it. I pulled on my goggles, mounted the machine, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a mechanical beast waking up. I hit the garage door opener and didn't wait for it to fully rise. I throttled forward, ducking my head as the machine shot out into the blizzard. Driving a snowmobile in a whiteout is like trying to ride a motorcycle inside a washing machine on the spin cycle. There is no up, no down, only swirling white chaos. The wind chill was -20, biting through my layers, seeking bone. But 30 years as a ranger in these mountains had given me an internal compass that no storm could scramble. I navigated by memory and the shadowy outlines of the ancient pine trees heading toward the coordinates Harlan had accidentally let slip during his conversation with Kendall Ridge 4 North Face. It took an hour of brutal riding to reach the tree line. When I arrived at the supposed accident site, I cut the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. I swept my high-powered flashlight across the slope. Harlan had claimed there was a massive avalanche here. There was snow, yes, piles of it. But to an untrained eye, it looked like a disaster. To my eyes, it looked like a landscaping project. The fracture line at the top of the ridge was too straight cut by explosives or shovels, not nature. The debris field was too contained. There were no snap trees at the base, which is impossible for an avalanche powerful enough to kill a man. It's a set, I whispered into my scarf, a stage for a murder. Harlan hadn't just covered up a crime, he had lazily terraformed one, assuming no one would check until spring thaw. I revved the engine, intending to circle the perimeter to look for tire tracks that didn't belong to rescue vehicles. I needed to know where they had really taken him. I accelerated, turning the handlebars sharp left. Crack! The sound was louder than a gunshot. The right ski of the snowmobile slammed into a granite boulder, hidden beneath the fresh powder. The impact was violent and instantaneous. I was thrown from the seat like a rag doll. I flew through the air, the world spinning in a dizzying blur of black and white before I slammed into a snowbank. Pain exploded in my left shoulder, a hot, searing agony that stole my breath. I lay there gasping, staring up at the swirling sky. My leg was twisted at an odd angle, and I could taste copper in my mouth. "Get up, Meredith," I commanded myself. "Get up or you die here." I tried to push myself up, but my arm collapsed under me. I groaned, blinking snow from my lashes. Through the haze of pain, I saw movement at the edge of the tree line. A shape detached itself from the darkness. It was massive, towering over 6 feet, wrapped in furs and shadows. It didn't move like an animal. It moved like a predator on 2 legs. I fumbled for the revolver in my pocket, but my fingers were numb, useless blocks of ice. The figure stepped closer, blocking out the little moonlight that filtered through the storm. A giant hand reached down toward me. I tried to scream, but the darkness took me first. I didn't wake up in heaven. Heaven doesn't smell like wet fir, pine resin, and wood smoke. I gasped, sitting up too quickly. Pain exploded in my shoulder, forcing a sharp cry from my throat. I was lying on a pile of cured elk skins near a crackling fire. The wind was still howling, but it sounded distant now, muffled by thick rock walls. "Easy," a voice rumbled from the shadows. "Dislocated shoulder. I popped it back in while you were out. You're welcome." I scrambled backward, ignoring the throbbing ache, my hand instinctively reaching for my holster. It was empty. My gun was gone. Looking for this, a figure stepped into the firelight. It was the giant from the storm. I knew him. Everyone in Aspen knew the legend of Cyrus. He was the ghost of White River, a recluse who lived off the grid. The townsfolk whispered that he was a PTSD-ridden ex-soldier who had snapped, maybe even killed a tourist, back in the 90s. Parents used his name to scare children into finishing their vegetables. Standing there, he looked every bit the monster 6'4", a tangled gray beard reaching his chest and eyes that glinted like polished flint. He held my revolver loosely in one massive hand barrel pointed safely at the ground. "You're Cyrus," I rasped, my throat dry as sandpaper. "What do you want money? I don't have any." Cyrus snorted a sound like grinding gravel. He set the gun down on a flat rock well out of my reach. "If I wanted your money, I would have left you to freeze and taken your wallet. Drink this." He shoved a tin cup into my trembling hand. It was herbal tea, bitter and hot. "Why help me?" I asked, taking a cautious sip. "Harlan says you're dangerous." Harlan. Cyrus spat the name like a curse word. He poked the fire with a stick, sparks flying upward into the darkness of the cave's ceiling. Harlan says a lot of things, mostly lies. He stood up, wiping his hands on his buckskin trousers. Can you walk? There's something you need to see. Someone who's been waiting for you. My heart skipped a beat. Cyrus didn't answer. He picked up a burning torch from the fire pit and motioned for me to follow. I limped after him, my left leg dragging slightly. We moved deeper into the cavern system. The air grew cooler here, damp and heavy. The flickering torchlight danced on the limestone walls, creating long, distorted shadows. I found him 2 days ago, Cyrus said, his voice echoing softly. Broken femur, severe hypothermia. He was lucky I was checking my trap lines. We turned a corner into a smaller, secluded chamber. There, lying on a makeshift bed of pine boughs and thermal blankets, was a man. His leg was immobilized in a splint made of smooth branches and paracord of professional field dressing. His face was pale, covered in a scruffy beard, and his eyes were closed in fitful sleep. I dropped to my knees, the pain in my own body vanishing instantly. I reached out a shaking hand to touch his cheek. It was warm. Garrett. I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Oh God, Garrett. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, they opened. He looked at me, his eyes unfocused for a moment before recognition flooded in. Mom? He cracked his voice, barely a whisper. You came. I wept. For the first time since the phone rang at 2 a.m., I let the dam break. I buried my face in my son's neck, sobbing until my ribs ached, smelling the sweat and dried blood, proving to myself that he was real. I thought I lost you, I choked out. She told me you were dead. She's planning the cremation. Garrett gripped my hand, his fingers weak but insistent. She planned it all, Mom. It wasn't an accident. He took a ragged breath, wincing as pain shot through his shattered leg. Kendall wanted a perfect Christmas photo for Instagram. She convinced me to drive up to the North Face. Just us. She said it would be romantic. He let out a bitter, dry laugh. I stood near the edge to check the view. She asked me to turn around and smile. And then I felt her hands on my back. She didn't hesitate. She shoved me. I fell 40 feet, Garrett whispered, staring at the cave ceiling. I hit a ledge. I blacked out. The next thing I knew, this giant was carrying me through the snow. I turned to Cyrus, who was standing guard by the cave entrance, whittling a piece of wood with a hunting knife. You saw it. I saw everything, Cyrus rumbled without looking up. I was checking my trap line below the ridge, saw her push him, saw her stand there and watch him fall. She waited 5 full minutes to make sure he didn't move, then she drove off. Why didn't you call 911? I asked, a flash of anger returning. Why keep him here in a cave? Cyrus stopped whittling. He looked me dead in the eye. I tried. I used my shortwave radio to patch into the emergency frequency. Guess who answered? Harlan. I told him I saw a woman push a man at North Face. You know what he said? He said, "Stay put, Cyrus. I'm coming to clean up the mess." He didn't ask if the victim was alive. He said, "Clean up." And that's when I knew. If I handed your boy over to them, he wouldn't make it to the hospital. My blood ran cold. Cyrus hadn't kidnapped Garrett. He had stolen him from the executioners. There's more, Garrett said, squeezing my hand again, his eyes wide with urgency. Toby, he was in the car, Mom. He had his iPad. He was playing a game in the back seat, but he loves to film everything. He holds that tablet up like a shield. Garrett swallowed hard. When we parked, the car was facing the cliff. If Toby was filming, he has it. He has the push on video. The drawing, the falling man, the smiling woman. It all made sense. Toby wasn't just a witness. He was the vault holding the only evidence that could send Kendall to prison for life. And that evidence was currently locked in a house with the murderers. We have to get that iPad, I said, standing up. Before she realizes... Suddenly, Cyrus raised a hand, silencing me. He tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. Quiet, he hissed. Then I heard it too, a low, menacing buzz vibrating through the rock walls. It was getting louder, the sound of high-powered engines. Cyrus extinguished the torch, plunging us into near darkness. Snowmobiles, he growled, grabbing his rifle from the wall. 6 of them, maybe 7. They aren't rescue lights, Meredith. They're running dark. Harlan hadn't given up. He had brought a hunting party, and we were the prey. The vibration hit us before the sound fully registered a deep, thrumming bass note that resonated through the limestone floor. Then came the roar. It wasn't the erratic whine of recreational riders. It was the synchronized growl of a coordinated pack. "They're circling," Cyrus said, checking the bolt on his hunting rifle. "They'll come from the ridgeline down. Standard sweep." I wiped the last tear from my cheek. The grieving mother vanished. The ranger returned. "We can't fight them in a shootout, Cyrus," I said, my voice steady. "There are too many of them, and we have Garrett. If a stray bullet hits this cave..." "So we run?" Cyrus asked. "No, we can't move Garrett fast enough. We dig in." I grabbed my tactical bag and pulled out a spool of high-tensile paracord and a handful of glow-sticks chemlights. We make them bleed for every inch. We make them think there's a platoon in here, not 2 geriatrics and a cripple. Cyrus grilled, a terrifying, toothy grin. "I like your style, Ranger." We moved to the cave entrance. The storm was our greatest weapon. Visibility was less than 5 feet. I directed Cyrus to the choke point's natural funnels where the trees grew thickest, forcing anyone approaching on foot to squeeze through single file. "Tripwire there." I pointed to a cluster of saplings. Waist height, not to trip them but to snag gear, slow them down. Cyrus moved like a ghost, stringing the lines with military precision. We didn't have claymores or grenades, so we used psychology. We bent saplings back and lashed them with Slipknot's simple whipping traps. They wouldn't kill, but a pine branch whipping out of the dark at 50 miles per hour would break a nose or shatter goggles. "Noise discipline," I whispered. "They're dismounting." We retreated back into the mouth of the cave, covering Garrett with a heavy thermal tarp to muffle any sound he might make. Outside, the forest was alive with the sweeping beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the snow. Snap. Thwack. A startled cry of pain echoed from the east. Someone had walked right into the whipping branch. "Damn it," a voice yelled over the wind. "Watch your sectors. They've got traps. Hold fire." Another voice commanded Harlan's deputies or hired muscle. "Eyes open. Don't shoot unless you have a target." The traps were working. They slowed the advance to a crawl. Fear is heavier than any backpack. Every shadow became a threat. Every rustle of the wind sounded like an ambush. Cyrus and I crouched behind a rock formation inside the entrance weapons, trained on the small patch of gray light. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The waiting was agony. Then silence. Too much silence. I shifted my weight, my knee popping slightly. Above us, to the left of the main entrance, there was a small fissure in the rock, a natural chimney for smoke. It was barely wide enough for a fox, let alone a man. But as I looked up, a beam of light shot through that fissure, illuminating the cave floor like a spotlight from hell. A face appeared in the crack. Tactical goggles, a black balaclava. The man looked down, his eyes locking directly onto mine. He raised a radio to his lips. "Jackpot," he whispered, his voice echoing down the stone chimney. "I found the rat hole." I didn't think. Instinct forged in the fires of 1,000 rescue missions took over the wheel. I grabbed the orange emergency flare gun from my tactical bag. I didn't aim for the man. I aimed for the rock wall just inside the fissure. Pop, hiss. The magnesium flare exploded into a blinding, searing crimson star within the confined space of the vent. "Ah!" the man screamed, clutching his face. His tactical night vision goggles, designed to amplify minimal light by 50,000 times, had just turned that red flare into a supernova inside his retinas. He was blinded instantly. "Go," I hissed to Cyrus. The giant didn't need telling. He was already moving a silent shadow, slipping out the main entrance. I heard a scuffle in the snow above us, the crunch of boots, a muffled grunt of surprise, and then the heavy thud of a body hitting the earth. Silence returned heavier than before. Seconds later, Cyrus dragged the unconscious mercenary into the cave entrance, stripping him of his radio and rifle. "He didn't have time to give coordinates," Cyrus whispered, checking the man's pulse. "But the others heard the scream. They're coming." "We can't move Garrett," I said, looking at my son. His skin was gray beads of sweat freezing on his forehead despite the cold. Moving him now with that shattered femur would kill him. We have to make them look somewhere else. We spent the next hour playing the most dangerous game of cat and mouse I had ever endured. While Cyrus guarded the cave, I crawled out into the blizzard. I took the mercenary's bloody bandage and tied it to a low branch 50 yards down the slope away from our hideout. I scuffed heavy boot prints leading toward the ravine, creating a narrative for the hunters to follow. The prey panicked and ran downhill. The wind was my accomplice, burying my real tracks as soon as I made them, but leaving the deep, deliberate fake ones just visible enough to tempt a hunter. I returned to the cave, shivering so violently my teeth rattled. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But there was no rest. Not yet. Garrett was moaning in his sleep. "Mom, cold. So cold." I knelt beside him, stripping off my gloves to touch his forehead. He was burning up. The heat coming off him was terrifying. Sepsis. Cyrus rumbled, kneeling beside me. He peeled back the thermal blanket to inspect the leg. The skin around the splint was angry and red streaks of infection beginning to climb up his thigh. "The field dressing held the bone, but the bacteria is winning. He needs high-grade antibiotics, IV fluids, a hospital." "We don't have a hospital," I whispered, wiping Garrett's face with snow to cool him down. "We have a cave and a blizzard. He won't last another 24 hours, Cyrus said bluntly. It wasn't cruelty. It was a combat medic's assessment. And neither will we. Harlan's men are sweeping the grid. Eventually they'll double back. We're sitting ducks." I looked at the flickering, dying embers of our small fire. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to walk, now dying by inches because of a woman's greed. Defense was a losing strategy. We were just delaying the inevitable. To save Garrett, I needed 2 things: medicine to keep him alive and the truth to set him free. Both of those things were locked inside the fortress on the hill. "I'm going back," I said, my voice cutting through the dark. Cyrus looked at me, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. "Back to the villa. That's suicide, Meredith. You barely made it out. They're all out here looking for us," I reasoned, standing up and checking the load in my revolver. "Harlan and his goons are combing the mountain. The house will be empty. Or at least empty of the heavy hitters. And if you're wrong, then I die trying." I tightened the laces of my boots. "I need you to keep him alive, Cyrus. Keep the fire low. Keep the entrance hidden. If I'm not back by dawn, I'll get him down the mountain or die standing over him," Cyrus promised. He handed me the mercenary's combat knife. "Take this. Bullets run out. Steel doesn't." I bent down and kissed Garrett's feverish forehead. "Hold on, baby. Mom's going to fix this. I promise." I turned to the cave entrance. The storm outside was a swirling vortex of white violence. It was madness to go back out there. But a mother's love is a form of madness, isn't it? I pulled my scarf up over my nose, took a deep breath of freezing air, and stepped out of the sanctuary, plunging myself back into the heart of the beast. I was going back to the lion's den, and this time I wasn't knocking on the front door. The blizzard had turned the world into a howling void, but it gave me the cover I needed. I didn't approach the front door nor the garage. I circled to the north side of the estate, where the foundation stones were oldest, dating back to the original 1920s mining cabin this mansion was built around. I fell to my knees, digging frantically through 3 feet of snow until my gloves struck rusted iron. The coal chute. Garrett used to hide here when he was a boy playing soldiers. I remember scolding him for ruining his Sunday best with soot. Now that soot was my salvation. I pried the hatch open. It groaned a sound of old metal protesting decades of disuse, and slid feet first into the darkness. I landed on a pile of coal dust in the sub-basement. It was pitch black and smelled of rot and damp earth. I clicked on my tactical light, keeping the beam low, and navigated the maze of pipes toward the wine cellar stairs. The house above was silent. Deadly silent. It felt less like a home and more like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. I crept up the stairs, my boots leaving faint black prints on the polished hardwood. I wiped them away with my scarf as I moved. I made a quick detour to the master bathroom, raiding the medicine cabinet for broad-spectrum antibiotics and painkillers leftovers from Garrett's dental surgery last year. I shoved the pill bottles into my pocket. Step 1, life support, check. Now for step 2, the truth. I slipped into Kendall's home office. It was a shrine to her vanity glass walls, modern art, and a massive mahogany desk. Behind the desk, concealed behind a pretentious oil painting of a storm at sea, was the wall safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew the safe existed, but I didn't have the combination. I stared at the digital keypad, 4 digits. I tried Garrett's birthday, 0412. The light flashed red. Error. Of course. Why would she use the birthday of the man she murdered? I tried Toby's birthday, 0707. Red light. Error. She didn't care enough about her son to use his date either. I closed my eyes, trying to think like her. Kendall was narcissistic, yes, but she was currently obsessed with one thing, her victory, her partner in crime. My fingers hovered over the keys. I remembered the date Harlan was born. We'd thrown him a surprise party at the station 5 years ago, August 9th. I punched in 0809. Click. The mechanism whirred and the heavy door swung open. The irony was so thick I could taste it like bile. She had literally locked my son's life away with her lover's birthday. It was the ultimate arrogance. I reached inside. There were stacks of cash passports and jewelry boxes. But shoved in the back, sitting on top of a velvet pouch, was a silver iPad with a cracked screen protector. Toby's iPad. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. I pressed the power button. The battery was in the red 12%, but the screen flared to life. Toby didn't use a passcode. He wasn't old enough to have secrets yet. I swiped up and tapped the Photos app. The most recent video was dated yesterday. I hit play. The video was shaky, filmed through the tint of a car window. I saw the back of Garrett's jacket. He was standing near the edge of the cliff, looking out at the snow. Kendall walked into the frame. She was wearing a white fur coat, looking like an ice queen. She put her hand on his back. It looked like a caress at first. Then she shoved, hard. The camera jolted violently, as Toby must have flinched. On the screen, Garrett disappeared over the edge. Kendall didn't scream. She didn't run to look. She just stood there, smoothed her hair, and then, God help me. She turned toward the car and smiled. A chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard seized my spine. I had the smoking gun. Suddenly, the front door downstairs slammed open. Heavy boots thundered on the marble floor. "Check the office!" Harlan's voice boomed, echoing up the stairs. I saw fresh tracks near the foundation. I froze, the iPad glowing blue in the dark room. They were here. The video on the screen ended, freezing on that chilling, triumphant smile of my daughter-in-law. My stomach turned bile, rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass walls of this office, but I forced the ranger in me to take the wheel. Anger is fuel, but panic is a brake. I couldn't afford to stop now. The heavy footsteps on the stairs were getting louder. Thud, 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 like the beat of a war drum. "Check the library," Harlan's voice boomed from the hallway. "And check the guest rooms. If she's in this house, I want her found." I didn't have time to run, but I had time to do something more damaging. My fingers flew across the iPad screen. I tapped the share icon. Upload to cloud drive. Select folder recipes. A small innocuous hiding place for a digital bomb. The progress bar appeared, a thin blue line crawling agonizingly slow. 20%, 45%. The doorknob to the office began to turn. 80%. "Come on," I mouthed silently, sweat stinging my eyes. 100%. Upload complete. I swiped the app closed, shoved the iPad down the front of my tactical vest, and dove into the only cover available. The knee hole of the massive mahogany desk. I curled myself into a tight ball, pressing my back against the wood, praying my breathing wouldn't betray me. Just as I pulled my boot in, the door swung open. "The office is clear." Kendall's voice drifted in. She sounded annoyed, not scared. "You're being paranoid, Harlan. The old hag is probably freezing to death in a snowbank halfway to the ridge. She's not James Bond. I saw tracks near the coal chute, Kendall," Harlan growled. He walked into the room. I could see his heavy police boots pacing on the Persian rug inches from my face. "Someone has been poking around." Probably a raccoon. Kendall dismissed him, the sound of ice clinking into a glass following her words. She was pouring a drink. Relax, darling. In 24 hours, the insurance company wires the funds. $5 million, tax-free. She laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Do you know what I'm going to buy first? A ticket to Saint-Tropez. I am done with this miserable snow. I'm done with the grieving widow act. It's exhausting. Don't count the money until the body is burned, Harlan muttered, pacing closer to the desk. He stopped right in front of where I was curled up. I held my breath, my hand tightening around the handle of the combat knife Cyrus had given me. If he looked down, if he bent over— You worry too much, Kendall cooed. Garrett is gone. The old lady is powerless. We won Harlan. Psst, psst. Harlan's phone vibrated violently, cutting her off. It's the team on the mountain, Harlan said. Silence followed as he read the message. The air in the room shifted instantly, the temperature dropping 10 degrees. What? Kendall asked, her voice losing its playful lilt. What is it? They lost him. Harlan whispered the words, dripping with venom. What do you mean, lost him? I mean, the tracks led to a ravine, but there's no body. Harlan roared. They found a bandage tied to a tree, a decoy. Someone is playing games with us, Kendall. Garrett isn't just alive, he's got help, and they are mocking us. Bam! Harlan's fist slammed down onto the surface of the desk directly above my head. The wood groaned under the impact, dust motes dancing in the sliver of light near my boots. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood to keep from gasping. Find them! Kendall hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. Kill them all. I don't care how you do it. Burn the whole mountain down if you have to. I'm going back out, Harlan snarled, and this time I'm taking the dogs. He turned and stormed out, Kendall following close behind her heels, clicking like gunshots. I waited until their footsteps faded down the stairs. I was trembling not from fear, but from a cold, crystalline rage. They wanted to burn the mountain fine, but they forgot one thing. I was the one holding the match. The front door slammed, the impact shuddering through the floorboards. Harlan was gone, taking his fury and his guns into the storm. That left the queen bee alone in her hive. I crawled out from beneath the desk, my knees protesting. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the iPad flat to my chest, feeling the cold metal through my thermal shirt, the shield that would save us, and slipped into the hallway. The house was unnaturally quiet, broken only by the hum of heating and the distant howl of wind. I moved carefully, stepping along the edges of the runners, where the floorboards wouldn't betray me. Toby's door waited at the end of the hall, still locked from the outside, Kendall's idea of protection. I pulled a multi-tool from my vest, slid the flathead into the simple privacy lock, and twisted. Click. The door opened. Toby sat exactly where I'd left him, curled into himself on the bed, staring at the wall. When the door creaked, he flinched violently, drawing his knees up as if bracing for pain. Toby, I whispered, it's Grandma. He turned. For a moment, he stared as though I weren't real. Then his face collapsed. No sound came. Trauma had stolen his voice, but tears streamed freely. He leapt from the bed and slammed into me, wrapping his arms around my waist with desperate strength. I held him, burying my face in his hair. He smelled of baby, shampoo, and fear. I've got you, I murmured. I'm never letting go again. But we have to play a game now, a very quiet one. Can you do that? He nodded against my chest. Good boy. I took his hand. We didn't go up. We went down. We slipped through the servants' stairs into the kitchen, then deeper into the sub-basement where I'd entered earlier. Past that, I led him into the wine cellar, a climate-controlled vault of expensive bottles. Watch, I whispered. I reached behind a dusty rack of 1980 Bordeaux and found the hidden latch Garrett had shown me years ago, left over from Prohibition days. I pulled. The heavy oak rack swung open, revealing a small concrete room. The panic room, I said. Only your dad and I know. We stepped inside. Cold, dry, safe. I pulled the rack shut and engaged the iron lock. 12 inches of reinforced concrete sealed us away. I settled Toby onto old rugs. Stay here, don't make a sound. I checked the iPad. 1 bar of Wi-Fi. Enough. The house's smart system junction box, the glass fortress's brain, hung on the wall. Kendall loved control. Lights, screens, locks. She was about to lose it. Then a sound drifted through the vent above. Click, clack, click, clack. Stilettos, fast, angry. They stopped directly above us. Toby Kendall's voice shrieked, "Open this door right now!" Silence. Then panic exploded. "Now where are you?" Furniture crashed. She'd lost her leverage, her prop. Toby covered his ears. "Let her scream," I whispered, turning to the junction box. "The world is about to hear everything she did." We spent 24 hours in that concrete box. We survived on a dusty bottle of vintage Pinot Noir, which I used to clean wounds, not drink, and a packet of stale crackers I found in my tactical vest. Toby slept most of the time, exhausted by terror. I didn't sleep at all. I spent the night stripping wires and reconfiguring the smart home's central nervous system. By 10 a.m. on the third day, the vibration of heavy tires on the gravel driveway above told me the show was about to begin. I watched it all unfold on the iPad screen, tapping into the security cameras I had hijacked. The driveway looked like a funeral procession for a head of state. Black Range Rovers and Escalades lined up, depositing the elite of Aspen tech moguls, real estate tycoons and socialites wrapped in furs worth more than my annual pension. They were here for the open bar and the gossip, not for Garrett. Inside the great room, the transformation was sickeningly beautiful. The staff had set up rows of gold Chiavari chairs facing a podium draped in white roses. A giant 85-inch screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a loop of photos: Garrett skiing, Garrett smiling, Garrett graduating. Photos of a life Kendall had stolen. "It's time, Toby," I whispered. I handed him a pair of noise-canceling headphones I'd found in the emergency kit. "Put these on. Close your eyes. Don't open them until I tap your shoulder." Toby obeyed, curling back into his safe corner. He trusted me. I turned back to the junction box. I had bypassed the firewall, physically hardwiring the iPad directly into the house's broadcast stream. Kendall could lock the doors, she could hire goons, but she couldn't stop a signal coming from inside the walls. My phone buzzed. 1 bar of signal. I typed a message to the number Cyrus had given me, a burner phone he kept for emergencies. Message: green light. Bring him home. Reply: ETA 2 minutes. Hold the door. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. There was no backup plan. If the signal failed, if Harlan stopped them at the gate, if the technology glitched, we were dead. On the screen, the murmur of the crowd died down. The lights dimmed appropriately. A spotlight hit the podium. Kendall walked out. She was a vision of tragic beauty. She wore a modest black dress, pearls, and a veil pulled back to reveal eyes that looked perfectly red-rimmed. She dabbed a handkerchief to her dry nose. The room held its breath. "Friends." She began, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "Family, we are gathered here to honor a man who was my rock, my soulmate, my everything." I watched her from the darkness of the cellar, my finger hovering over the cast screen button on the iPad. Garrett loved these mountains. She continued looking up at the ceiling as if talking to heaven. And in the end, the mountains took him. It was a tragic accident, a slip. A moment of fate that left me shattered. "Liar," I hissed into the stale air of the prohibition room. "I wish—" Kendall sniffed a tear actually rolling down her cheek. "I wish I could have one more moment with him, just to tell him how much I loved him." "Be careful what you wish for, darling," I whispered. I didn't wait for the applause. I didn't wait for the eulogy to finish. I pressed play. "But wait before I detonate this truth bomb. I have a question for you. If you were me, would you hand this video to the police quietly, or would you expose her right here in the middle of the funeral? Let me know your choice in the comments. Quietly or publicly. And please note, the rest of this story includes some fictional elements and may not be entirely real. If you don't wish to hear it, you can turn off the video right here. But if you're ready, let's see what happens next." Kendall opened her mouth to speak, but her voice was drowned out by a deafening, static screech from the speakers. The guests covered their ears, gasping as the lights in the great room flickered violently. On the massive 85-inch screen behind the podium, the slideshow of Garrett's childhood photos vanished. In its place, a shaky vertical video flared to life. The room went dead silent. It was the view from a car window. The audio was crisp, the howling wind of the north face. On screen, giant figures filled the frame, the back of Garrett's jacket, and Kendall wearing her distinctive white fur coat, the same one she had worn in Vogue last winter. "Turn around, darling," the on-screen Kendall said. Her voice was unmistakable. Garrett turned. On-screen, Kendall didn't hug him. She stepped forward, placed both gloved hands on his chest, and shoved. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. A champagne glass shattered on the floor. The camera jolted as the person holding it, Toby, flinched. On the massive display, everyone saw Garrett disappear over the edge. But the horror wasn't the fall. It was what happened next. The on-screen Kendall smoothed her hair, checked her nails, and then looked directly at the car. She smiled. A cold, victorious predator's smile. On the podium, the real Kendall froze. Her face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. She looked tiny, shriveled under the looming image of her own monstrosity. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Someone turn it off! It's a fake! It's AI! Turn it off!" Harlan was already moving. He was shoving guests aside, charging toward the AV console in the corner. I grabbed the microphone in the wine cellar and flipped the switch to all house page. "Great performance, Kendall." My voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, echoing like the voice of God from the walls themselves. But the audience is bored. Kendall spun around in a circle, eyes wide and wild. "Who is that? Where are you?" Harlan froze halfway to the console, his hand drifting to the service weapon on his hip. He knew that voice. "You thought you buried us," I said, my anger vibrating through the floorboards. "You thought you could buy a new life with my son's blood. But you forgot one thing, Kendall. You never check your blind spots." "Show yourself!" she screamed, tearing at her veil. "I'm right here," I said. "But I didn't come alone. Look behind you." Every head in the room turned toward the massive double oak doors at the back of the hall. Boom. The doors burst open, kicked in by a boot with the force of a battering ram. Wind and snow swirled into the warm room, creating a dramatic fog. Through the mist, a giant figure stepped forward. Cyrus. He looked like an avenging angel in buckskin pushing a wheelchair. And sitting in that chair, pale-bearded, with his legs splinted and wrapped in thermal blankets, was the ghost. "Hello, darling," Garrett said. His voice was weak, but in the silent room it carried like a gunshot. "Did you miss me?" "No," Kendall whispered, stumbling backward, knocking over the podium. "No, you're dead. I saw you fall. You're dead." "He's alive!" Harlan roared. The cornered rat finally snapped. He drew his Glock, aiming not at Garrett, but at the crowd looking for a hostage, a shield, a way out. "Drop it, Harlan." The command came from everywhere. Behind Cyrus, a dozen figures in tactical gear flooded into the room. FBI, state troopers. The red laser dots of their rifles danced across Harlan's chest like fireflies. "I'm the sheriff!" Harlan screamed, sweat pouring down his face, the gun shaking in his hand. "You take orders from me." He swung the gun toward Garrett. Crack. A single shot rang out, not from Harlan. Harlan spun around, clutching his right shoulder as blood sprayed onto a guest's fur coat. He dropped the gun, collapsing to his knees with a howl of agony. A sniper positioned on the mezzanine balcony cycled his bolt. "Secure him," an agent yelled. 3 officers swarmed Harlan, zip-tying his hands behind his back as he cursed and spat blood. Kendall stood alone on the stage, the video of her crime still looping on the giant screen behind her, a smile on the screen, a mask of terror on her face. She looked at Garrett, then at the police, and then she bolted. She hiked up her black dress and ran toward the French doors leading to the terrace. "Don't let her leave," I yelled into the mic. She didn't get 3 steps. 2 female agents tackled her, driving her face into the expensive Persian rug. "Get off me!" Kendall screamed, a raw, animalistic sound that shredded her throat. "I'm Kendall Mercer." "You can't touch me." It was an accident. He slipped. Click, click. The handcuffs snapped shut. "It's over, Kendall," Garrett said softly, watching the woman he once loved being dragged to her feet. You wanted everything. Now you have nothing." Kendall threw her head back and let out a long, piercing scream of rage that echoed through the house she had killed to keep. As the agents hauled Kendall toward the door, she stopped fighting. The manic energy drained out of her, leaving only a desperate, hollow shell. She dug her heels into the Persian rug and looked back at Garrett one last time. "I did it for us," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Garrett, please. I wanted the money so we could be free, so we could start over away from this town. I love you." Garrett sat in his wheelchair, wrapped in the thermal blankets Cyrus had kept him alive with. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman who had shoved him off a cliff, and smiled. "You don't love me, Kendall," he said softly, his voice devoid of anger, filled only with a profound pity. "You love the reflection of yourself in my bank account. And as for starting over, you will, in a 6x8 cell." He nodded to the agents. "Take her away." Kendall slumped defeated and was dragged out into the snowstorm she had hoped would cover her crimes. Harlan followed moments later on a stretcher, handcuffed and cursing his career and life ending in disgrace. The room fell silent save for the wind still swirling through the broken doors. I stepped out from the hidden door behind the wine rack, holding Toby's hand. The moment Toby saw his father, he let go of me. He didn't run. He walked, trembling, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he whispered. It was the first word he had spoken in 3 days. Garrett opened his arms, ignoring the pain in his broken leg. Toby buried his face in his father's chest, sobbing the heavy, healing tears of a nightmare finally ending. I joined them, wrapping my arms around my son and grandson, closing the circle. We were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but we were whole. Standing by the door, Cyrus watched us, leaning on his rifle. He turned to leave, shrinking back into the shadows he preferred. "Cyrus," I called out. The giant stopped. "You're not going back to that cave," I said firmly. "Not tonight. There's a guest room with a fireplace and a hot shower, and I make a hell of a pot roast." Cyrus looked at me, then at Garrett, and finally at Toby. The hard lines of his face softened. "I suppose a hot shower wouldn't hurt." 1 month later, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm golden glow over the living room. The smell of lilies and death was gone, replaced by the scent of cinnamon pine and roasting chicken. Outside, the snow was falling gently, no longer a weapon but a blanket covering the scars of the mountain. Garrett was sitting in the armchair, his legs still in a cast but looking healthier. The color had returned to his cheeks. He was reading a book to Toby, who was curled up on the rug sketching. No more falling men or blue monsters. Today, Toby was drawing a picture of a giant with a beard saving a hiker. Cyrus was outside on the porch chopping wood. He hadn't moved in permanently, he valued his solitude too much, but he came by for dinner every Sunday. He was no longer the ghost of White River, he was family. I sat by the window sipping tea, watching the snowfall. The lawyers said the trial would be long, but the outcome was certain. With the video evidence and Harlan's testimony, he flipped on Kendall to get a reduced sentence. They were looking at 25 years to life. The $5 million insurance policy was void. Kendall had lost everything: her freedom, her son, and the money she worshipped. She had played a high-stakes game of chess, thinking she was the queen. She forgot that even a pawn can checkmate a king if it protects what matters. I looked at my son, laughing at something Toby said. I looked at the peace in this house that had once been a prison of lies. Money is loud. Greed is flashy. It screams for attention and demands to be fed. But love, real, fierce, protective love, it's quiet. It waits in the dark. It endures the cold. And when the time is right, it doesn't need to scream. It just whispers, "Look behind you." And by then, for the wicked, it's already too late. Sitting by the fireplace, watching Garrett take those difficult but steady steps across the living room, I shudder to realize how blind I truly was. I used to think family drama stories were just scripted plays on TV, but no, the tragedy was brewing right under my own roof, and I missed the signs. Don't be like me. Don't let politeness or self-doubt silence your gut instincts. If your intuition screams that something is wrong, listen to it before it's too late. I thank God every single day for giving me the strength to survive that blizzard. When I was lying alone in the deep woods thinking death was imminent, it was God who guided Cyrus to find me. And it was God who shed light on the dark truth hidden behind my daughter-in-law's glamorous mask. People often think grandma stories are just about knitting sweaters or baking cookies. They assume the elderly are frail and harmless. They are dead wrong. Grandma stories steeped in gunpowder and snowstorms like mine are proof of one thing: no one protects a family quite like a grandmother. This wasn't just another one of those messy family drama stories about fighting over an inheritance. It was a brutal lesson in misplaced trust. I hope that after hearing this, you'll look at grandma's stories differently, not as simple tales, but as chronicles where silver-haired women don't just talk, they fight to survive. Because the most painful family drama stories often start with the fakest smiles. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever had to stand up to protect a loved one, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to spread these deep life lessons together. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. And a final warning. The upcoming stories may contain certain fictional elements constructed for educational and artistic purposes. If you feel this content isn't right for you, please feel free to exit and choose content that better suits your preferences.